Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Probably a better day than Boogie, but he's actually not the subject of this video. Rather, the documentary about him is what I want to talk about. It is a documentary called The Dark Sad Life of Boogie 2988. It is by a guy named Mike Klum, and I think it's an excellent documentary to watch because of his very creative and effective use of storytelling techniques. Rather than just giving us a snapshot of his subject, he actually tells us a story and does it in what might actually be considered a fairly conventional, like 3-act format with an A, a B, and a C story. There's a conflict and a resolution within this documentary because of his creative use of editing and the way he's able to present facts about Boogie kind of out of order and in a sequence that tells us a story. It's very compelling, and it makes us really feel certain things about the character. It's very effective use. I think Mike Klum's very talented at what he did with this, and I'd love to see more of it. But we should also be aware that he is telling a story. A lot of people think documentary just means real. No, there is a story being told here, and that is what I really want to, not that the story isn't true, but we're telling a story. We're framing the facts in a way for the viewer to feel certain appropriate emotions and to come to certain conclusions. That's very, very important. Other YouTubers are already making videos about how this documentary, it doesn't tell the whole story, or that Boogie's not actually broke, as we'll find out, as we'll learn with the conflict. That's not what I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about Boogie. I want to talk about the Boogie that Mike Klum shows us. I want to talk about the conflict that Mike Klum presents us with in this documentary, which I think is really well made, and I recommend that you guys watch it if you want to get an idea of what he's doing here. So I mentioned storytelling techniques. There is a conflict. What is the conflict? Well, the conflict is this YouTuber, Boogie2988, is broke. He had a really explosive and successful career at one point, and now that has collapsed. So his career collapsed over a couple of years, and now he's broke. He can't pay his bills. YouTube is not bringing in the money that it used to bring in, and he's got lots of health issues. So he's broke financially. He's broken physically. He's morbidly obese. He has multiple problems with his body. And then he is also broken emotionally. He makes bad decisions. He does bad things. He comes from an abusive background. All of those sorts of things. This is what we get in the exposition phase of the documentary. It has an exposition just like you would have in a movie. If this was a fictional movie, you would format it in, you would format the cinematography and the interviews in the same way, but you would think about telling the story in the same way. We're doing an exposition on the character, and it's a story of redemption. So the conflict is, how will Boogie, the problem that has to be solved, that's really what I think about with conflict. How will Boogie fix himself? How will he fix his finances? How will he fix his body? And how will he fix his personal state? How will he fix himself on a emotional level in order to be healthy, right? And to be okay. So that's the conflict that we get. We start by really talking about his finances. He was very popular at one point, and if you don't know who he is, just a little background, he was kind of one of the original YouTubers. He was like an OG YouTuber. Became famous with these skits with this raging gamer named Francis. I think they're still pretty funny. They were way funny back in the day because they kind of pointed to a true personality type, which was this irate, raging gamer that you maybe have experienced on Xbox Live in the 2000s. It's like, I'm not always racist, but when I am, it's on Xbox Live. Or in World of Warcraft, back during the Wild West of World of Warcraft, when people would just rage on Fant, just be horrible, the Onyxia wipe animation. So kind of directionally pointed towards that. Very funny, gave him a lot of attention, turned that into a career with YouTube, and then he got married. He was called the Mr. Rogers of YouTube, and then what happened? He got divorced, his life collapsed, more and more facts started to come out with him. He started saying more and more perverse and bad things and revealing more and more unlikable things about himself, talking to the audience about a lot of negative things about himself in such a way that he alienated a lot of people. He got in trouble for discharging a firearm when another YouTuber stalked him and showed up at his house. There were things like that happened that caused this kind of collapse. So we get that at the exposition. Then we go a little bit deeper. We start talking about his health problems. You see him like taking a bath and talk about the pain that he's in and his fat rolls and how he had weight loss surgery, but there's nothing else really to do about it. I think that particular fact comes a little bit later. But we have that. So he has his body's broken. And then how are we going to fix that? How are we going to make ends meet? So the next things that Mike shows us are Boogie's attempts to fix what is wrong. So first of all, he has to fix the immediate problem of how am I going to pay my rent on time? And the answer is, for him, he's going to sell magic cards. So you see him go to the magic shop and sell some magic cards, but he's not getting the money that he wants from the magic cards. They've gone down in value. They were reserve list cards, but now, they're not worth as much money. That's what we get for that. So he's trying to solve the immediate problem, but there's no deeper problem. How will he fix his YouTube career, right? Well, maybe he could get a job. So that's something that we introduce in the middle. Him trying to do this. He goes to a recruiter and basically says a bunch of things that would make him not be hired by anybody. He says, he talks about, I'm disabled and I'm fat. I can't do this. I can't do that. I'm a felon. And I used to work in the porn industry. Wow, dude. And so she's like, obviously he's doing it for effect. Like he thinks it's a comedic thing to do. And he's trying to get his kicks off and showing everything bad about himself and everything bad he's done in the past. And the recruiter just kind of calls him on his BS. It's like, nobody's going to want to hire you. You're saying you can't do all these things. Like, you're obviously not serious about this. And then we follow that up with like, I can't get another job. I have 4 million YouTube subscribers, which makes us, when we're presented with him at the beginning, there's just almost kind of a disgust with him. Like he's physically has a disgusting form, right? Sorry if somebody is watching this that's overweight, but like morbid obesity, most people find disgusting. So he has a disgusting appearance. He has a disgusting past where he's paid for prostitutes and wasted his money on prostitutes, lost his money in crypto, making stupid decisions for that. And even though he's somewhat disgusting with those things that he did in the past, there's still a pathos to him. And so we actually want him to be able to fix what's wrong with him in this story of redemption. And the fact that he goes to the recruiter and he's like, I'm not going to get a regular job. It's like, we try to solve the problem and we fail. That's a great midpoint of any story that you happen to be telling. Is you try to solve the problem and the hero fails. And that's what we get in the documentary. We get a moment presented in the middle, in the midpoint of the film, that shows him trying to solve the problem and failing. Now we get a B story after that. We haven't heard anything about this beforehand. We've just heard talk about him sleeping with prostitutes and escorts and stuff. Whoa, lo and behold, Boogie has a girlfriend. A B story romance. Woo! That's what we're getting right there. Now, this is beginning in media res, so of course what we have to do to establish the romance is go back and explain where the romance came from. Boogie meets this young woman, very young. He's like 48. She's young. And honestly, really good looking compared to where Boogie's at. So people who are feeling bad about their lives, like, man, I'm never going to get a girl. It's like, there's hope for everyone. But she's obviously a very broken person too. So my father's not in my life, blah, 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 blah. I love Boogie, blah, right? So we have a B story romance. Is that romance going to fix Boogie? That's presented as a solution to Boogie's internal problems, his problems with himself, his problems of like, I don't love myself. And then you get this scene where he's like, my therapist says, I just need to learn to love myself and the rest of it will fall into place. So will he be able to love himself by being loved externally by another person? We have another character who's invested in the success of Boogie, not just the viewer, right? So we have another character who cares about the protagonist of Boogie fixing his problem. And then towards the end, we get kind of a C story solution, which is we're really looking at Boogie's personal issues, why he's so depressed, why he, why he can't fix himself, why he does bad things. My therapist, he goes and he does mushrooms with a self-professed shaman. And this is sort of the conclusion of it. And then we get a couple of scenes afterwards where he explains how his whole mindset has changed because of doing the mushrooms, and that's kind of the end of the documentary. So Mike does a really good job, Mike Klum does, of arranging all of the facts in such a way that he tells a story with a plot, even though there's not a whole lot of events actually happening, right? We're just shooting a couple interviews, shooting a couple scenes, but we arrange our presentation of those facts in such a way that we get like an exposition, we get an attempt to solve the problem, and some exploration of what Boogie's trying to do to fix his life. We get a B story, and then we get kind of a C story solution. We get a final act solution, which is like if he can fix his internal problems, then he will stop self-sabotaging himself. He'll stop saying bad things on stream. He'll stop doing bad things. He'll stop wanting bad things. He'll stop making bad decisions with his money and accept himself and be able to be healed. We don't get like a follow-up like Boogie was better, right? But what we get is maybe a point towards redemption, like Boogie could redeem himself. Now, there's a couple of other interesting techniques that Mike used in this. Let me talk a little bit more about the technical side now that you've got the idea of the story. So if you're doing a documentary like this on a subject, you can use careful editing and careful choice of when you present certain facts about the person. Because the first half of the documentary, we don't know that Boogie 2998 is in a relationship. We only learn that later as the thing progresses. So choosing when you present the facts will be able to create an effect where, we get the feeling of a plot progressing, even though nothing has actually changed. We're just, continuing to film the same people over and over again. So anyway, there's that. Now, some technical things. What's very interesting about this documentary, if you're wondering how he did it, he interviewed Boogie and his girlfriend, interviewed the girlfriend, shot a couple of scenes with Boogie, like going to the recruiter and going to the magic shop and kind of walking around his house, and edited those very creatively into the set of facts so that we get this story sequence. He also used a lot of music, and the music to me sounded just like, licensed music. It's not bad, but it fills up the auditory space. When we are showing the audience an image and we're not having a lot of words, or the words are coming kind of slow, we need something auditorily to fill that space because it's an audiovisual medium. And so he uses a lot of good songs that re-emphasize the mood he's trying to portray. We're trying to see a sad person, a dark, sad person, hopefully redeeming themselves. So there's like harmonica music and this kind of stuff. I actually find it better than a lot of documentaries I've seen with original music where it's like frown, like sound design noises that just get really annoying after a while. The licensed music just worked really good. We also have Mike sort of breaking the fourth wall, even though we don't think of the fourth wall in a documentary as something, because this is telling a story. It sort of is breaking the fourth wall, where he turns the camera from the subject to himself and talks about it and says stuff like, I don't want this to be the first documentary for my new channel because it's way too depressing, right? So he's telling you, even though he's giving you this reflection, he's kind of telling you how you should feel about it. This should be depressing. This should be a sad story, not one where you feel nothing but disgust, but where you feel pathos for Boogie. And he does it at the end where him and Boogie are talking, and he's like, I would have said, at the beginning I would have said, yeah, you could be redeemed, but now I'm saying, you just need to find another job. Really well done. So I recommend it for all of those reasons. Now, the last things that I guess I will really talk about is some of the deeper ideas maybe that are at play, which is, can a person turn it around, right? Can a person with all of these problems turn it around? We always hope that a person can turn it around, no matter how bad things are, because we see in ourselves things that need to turn around, and we hope that we can turn them around. It's the sinner's redemption as a classic story. And he does a good job with presenting us the idea that maybe Boogie could better himself. And if you are familiar with Boogie from years ago, he used his YouTube money to better his life in what appeared to be a lot of different ways. He got married, and he was able to get married. He fixed his teeth. He had these like rotten teeth. So he had like implants done to have like nice, bright, shiny white teeth that look really good. And he had weight loss surgery. And this is brought up in the documentary. You have weight loss surgery. What else can you do? He needs to take the next steps himself to fix the weight. The weight didn't fix everything about him. The weight loss surgery did not. After all those things happened, after he used that money to sort of better his situation, his life started to collapse. He got divorced and gained weight back and wasn't able to stick with it, and lost money and this and that and the other. All these bad things that happened. So he was kind of a redemption story 6 years ago, and then has become like a, rags to riches to rags story, right? And rags like, you've kind of brought this on yourself, man. But because we all see the bad decisions in our lives, we empathize. I don't want to say we empathize, but there's a pathos with him that's like, we want him to be able to fix that and be a better person, because we're seeing him being humanized in the film itself. There's also something that's interesting about Boogie, and this is a little bit outside that. I don't want to talk about him as a person too much, but he said for years that YouTube can't be a forever career, that he knows that there's at some point the train's coming into the station, you have to get off, right? And maybe that is this point for him, and that he felt like super grateful to have all the money and all the fame and all the love from people while he could have it. And once his life started to collapse, he started really focusing inward on that. This brings me this brings me to another really important little thing that happens in the middle of the film that I forgot to mention, which is we have an interview with Dr. Grant, who's a YouTube psychiatrist. Perfect entrance for him. And he's saying, a lot of the things that Boogie does are, kind of coincide with, covert narcissism or vulnerable narcissism. And then Boogie kind of like reiterates that. So he has this personality disorder. And that emphasizes after the failure to get a job that his real problem is who he is and what he does, his personality disorder, his vulnerable narcissism, his need for people to have sympathy and pathos towards him, and for him to always feel like he's the victim all the time. Can he fix that? Maybe the shrooms did it. He pretends like it does. There is a feeling, I do want to bring up a couple points in this movie, that there are places where I feel that the subjects are not being truthful. And, about somewhere in the 40-minute range, you have Boogie and his young girlfriend, talking about stuff and crying and saying he's going to drop dead. And she's like, I can't live without you. And it feels very contrived, like they are putting on a show for the camera. It feels like acting, right? It doesn't feel real. It feels like a moment that has been constructed for the camera to serve the purposes of the story. It feels like something you'd put in a movie, not like something you would just catch if you were filming a documentary, right? You would set it up and be like, I want you guys to talk about this in the future and talk about this and cry, and then they did that. Now, I don't know if Mike set that up or if that was something Boogie and his girlfriend did, but it did not feel very authentic to me at all. Likewise, after he ate the shrooms, he said a bunch of things that he thought that seemed to me like a person would think having, okay, how should I put this? There's like too many conditionals here for me to express it in a normal sentence. He was saying the things that that you would think a person who did psychedelics and had a transformative experience ought to say, and would provide the movie a sense of closure and resolution to his conflict. The things that he thinks someone would say, not the things that he actually feels. It doesn't feel like he actually feels those things. It's like, what would a hippie say? Oh man, it's all BS and none of it matters. And I was dumb to think that this stuff was important and to worry, and it's all going to be good. It's like, those are the kinds of things that you would, I'm going to imagine a hippie who had a transformative experience, and that's what he would say. It's like imagining what a character would say rather than something authentic. It felt very contrived, that scene as well. but it does bring a conclusion to the story, which I think is the point of the documentary, is to tell the story about Boogie. A very specific story, drawing you towards a certain conclusion and having you feel certain things for the subject of the story, who is the YouTuber Boogie2998. So anyway, leave me your thoughts down below if you happen to see this. This analysis is now like 1/3 of the length of that documentary, but I wanted to get in deep and talk about the storytelling techniques that were there. And if I spend any more time on it, then it'll be too much. But anyway, those are things that are worth talking about and thinking about for this documentary. And you can leave me your thoughts about Boogie or the documentary down below, and I'd be happy to know what other people think about it as well. So take it easy. By the way, Patreon free book this month is Eyes in the Walls, and any month it is Keys to Prolific Creativity. So patreon.com/DavidVStewart, and you can hop on the Discord and ask me writing questions or anything else. Lots of good discussions on the Discord sphere these days. So take it easy, and I'll see you all next time.